Wounded Fawn. And I want to say congratulations because I just saw on your Twitter earlier today, it was listed on Rotten Tomatoes best horror movies of 2022 ranked.
Number 5,
Number
which
5.
is crazy, and that's just now. In the next few weeks, there'll be something else that'll qualify and change Rotten Tomatoes' rankings. But yeah, Travis is a heavy hitter. I mean, each of his projects have been a hit in their own right. I think Girl on the Third Floor was like for a moment the most watched movie on Netflix or something insane.
Wow.
He just, and Jacob's Wife won like Fangoria Chainsaw Awards and was certified fresh like right away. He just knows how to make them, you know.
For sure. This was definitely my favorite of all of the films that he's made so far. I've seen all those 3 projects that you just mentioned. This one just for me took it to another level. And I'm a huge fan of pro wrestling, and CM Punk. Phil Brooks is the main character in Girl on the Third Floor. And I love that movie. But yeah, I mean, Wounded Fawn took it to another level. And it was funny because I watched it first and then Josh watched it like, was it right after me or like concurrently before I
mean, I pretty much started watching it as you were about to finish it. So
right. So I'm texting him. I'm like, dude, this is nuts. Like I couldn't believe my eyes with some of the stuff that was going on. So yeah, crazy film. I guess we can kind of dive into that and just kind of ask some questions relating to Wounded Fawn. So first of all, your signature weapon in this film. What's the origin behind that? Like, where did that come from? And also I want to ask, did you get to keep it after the film was done?
Well, if I did get to keep it, I would not have made it very far on the plane because the real one, we had 2 of them, the replica of which was, you know, used for obviously all the physical contact, including when I was, you know, no spoilers, using it on a certain person, multiple people. So Travis set out to find an obscure weapon that was unlike anything we'd seen in the slasher verse before. And this character, Bruce, that I play, this total narcissist, would be one to want to kill with an exotic thing. You know, as Travis put it the other day, he's like, I'm not like that Michael Myers type. I'm not like Freddy with his glove. I use a bog knock, because it's an assassin's tool that originated in India that makes murders look like tiger attacks. And that's what the thing actually is. So he basically looked up like obscure murder weapon and found this on the internet. It's called a bog knock, and we had 2 of them. The real thing is heavy and really, really kind of scary to, you know, put in your hand, because you're like, you could fuck someone up with this thing. But it made it, I don't know, it's just it was kind of an incredible compliment to this insane character and this insane script that he'd written. Yeah, I'm glad you called that one out. I can't remember if you had a follow-up question to that. I'm short-term memory today, but yeah, that thing was rad.
It's all good. And another thing that I noticed as I was watching it was just the vibes in general were something else. And I was talking to Josh and I said, this reminds me of a giallo, like an old Italian giallo film.
Yeah. Which,
well put,
speaking of, I'm
really
wearing a Suspiria shirt today.
Yeah. So Travis set out as an homage. Absolutely.
Okay, that's actually cool to hear, because that is, I mean, Brett has watched a lot of them, but I have watched, it is like my favorite subgenre of horror movies. And Dario Argento specifically, and Mario Bava, and all of those kind of heavy hitters are some of my favorite directors of all times. And I think right up from the very beginning of that movie, the colors, the doors, the vibes, the atmosphere, how it's set up. Yeah, it could be, I've seen a lot of people talk about it as like a traditional slasher in the beginning, and then we go other places. But to me, immediately I was like, oh, this is a gala movie, is what it feels like. So it's cool to hear that as it basically being kind of intentional, right? Like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. He knew that he wanted the blood to have that red orange kind of a tint to it. He knew he wanted to shoot it on 16 mil, which Joe Bagos had done on a movie called Bliss, and he was just sort of asking him to demystify that process. And then, you know, you go to a composer even like Val, who's this total genius Swede of a man, and he knew exactly kind of imbue that sort of goblin-esque sort of female vocal interlaid kind of composition, and then what you end up having is just it's this wholly visionary idea. I mean, the movie is Patrick Bateman at the Evil Dead cabin at its most boiled down, but then so it's a film for, say, the metal of us horror fans, but it's also a film that you can unpack as like an artist or someone who understands Greek mythology, which I think is why it's hitting on so many levels. And I'm curious too, from your guys' perspective, is just I'm amazed when anything gets out there and sort of quote unquote hits on a level the way that, say, even Terrifier 2 is right now, in a different sort of way. I wonder if it's that it's just fresh and it's not entirely derivative, like it's got a fresh set sort of actually the movie fresh style setup, and then okay, psycho killer's taking a girl to a cabin, but then it goes off the rails. Is it that we all want to see something different, right? Is that kind of why we're all stoked on the Chainsaw Man of it all, and the Art the Clown, and the Wounded Fawn, and like even Nope, which like Nope was not my number one movie, but like the imagery, the Akira shout out, I mean, all that kind of that brilliance inlaid. That's what we're kind of excited about. The Barbarian, right? I mean, it's just like you guys as consumers, that's what you're stoked to consume. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
You are listing, I mean, things that hit for us, recently, all of those things. And I think, Brett and I are huge. Horror is our favorite genre, not just in video games, movies, TV. Like that's our bread and butter. That's what we love. And I think the great thing about movies like Wounded Fawn and a lot of the other ones that you mentioned is that there is something familiar to them. There's like a touchstone that you can go back to. Like to me, like I immediately was like, oh, Gallo, good. I can roll up with a blanket and this is comfort food to me. But then on the flip side of that, it's like I also love movies and I study film and I work in theater and stuff like that. So seeing the more deep parts of those things that don't come off as pretentious but actually thought-provoking gives you the touchstone to things that you love, but also challenges you as a consumer. But I think also somebody that doesn't care about either of those things can also watch it and enjoy it. And those three pillars are what I think makes things like Wounded Fawn really hit and take off.
Yeah, you really have to. I'm learning that you have to make a splash. You have to, your movie has to be noisy, and you're touching on all of the things I think that qualify. The movies that broke through, even Hellbender, which I haven't seen. Everybody's dying, over Hellbender. They have these splashy plots and sequences where you can go like, oh, you got to see this movie because of this. As someone who came from like the viral video world, like coming up through making videos for College Humor, that's how I got my start. It's like, that's very familiar to me now. You have to break through, especially now that any of us could make a movie on our phone or what have you. It's an interesting thing to kind of talk about with people.
Yeah, and we just came off of the whole like reboot era where I feel like every movie was getting a reboot. So like it's getting that breath of fresh air for like especially a horror film, because so many horror films have been remade over the years. It's just like, mwah, like it's time,
Truly, it's rad to see, especially on the Rotten Tomatoes list, how many of them are original. I was going back and going, wait a minute, let me just take a look here. It's like even like Ty West movies, just Pearl and X alone, the fact that they were out and they were back to back, and he smartly, or A24 smartly was like, yeah, fuck it, go for it. Like spend another $1 million on just using these sets. Just I don't know, it gives me hope for what 2023 and beyond is going to be. And also the fact that Universal just like really doubled down on some gonzo shit. Megan being one of them, which I'm sure is going to be bonkers in its own way from Blumhouse, but like Violent Night and Nope. I mean, I don't know.
Cocaine Bear.
I've got high hopes. Cocaine Bear. Absolutely. Like that's absolutely genius. And that movie's going to be packed.
Oh,
and people are going to go back for that,
Yeah.
Cool.
100%.
So something that you touched on, and I know Brett and I are really dying to ask you about one moment in particular in Wounded Fawn, and we can of course talk about your other movies as well. We don't have to spend the whole time Wounded Fawn, but we love it. You touched on something that people remember moments, and I do think it's one thing to have a complete package for something, and it's another thing to be able to market that and be like, oh, you have to see this scene or this moment or whatever it is, like you talked about, or this kill. Think about like Terrifier 2, like the bedroom scene in that, with like there's some fucked up shit going on out there, but people remember it and it's awesome. Wounded Fawn, this is going to be a spoiler, and I don't know if you want to go into them or not, but the last moment of the movie with you performing a scene in one take that's a really long time I'm trying. I'll let you dictate how far into it we go. But at the very end of the movie is really long. And I mean that just in the sequence itself, and it's really messed up, and it really is seared into, I think, our brains. So would you want to touch on that a little bit, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, by the time we shot that sequence, it was the end of shooting. It was the last 48 hours of shooting. And, you know, in your second to last day, when as Travis uses the analogy of the band all knows what they're capable of, what they're down to do, what their strengths are and all. He knew that he could ask both Sarah and I to stay in it for this 11-minute take. You know, we spent an 11-minute film cartridge. That's how long a cartridge lasts, as I've learned. So there's 5 other minutes on the cutting room floor, believe it or not, of this very scene. He just was like, I know you guys can do it. Let's, you know, just go for it. Just give it a try. And I was like, oh yeah, absolutely. So when people see that and they ask me, oh my gosh, weren't you cold and weren't you wet and weren't the rocks tough on your legs? And, you know, what about you're wearing this prosthetic eyepiece? And yeah, I mean, there was discomfort, but that was so eclipsed by the excitement and the buzz of just like being in the theater of it all. Like I come from theater too, and it's, you know, it's like, oh yeah, you got to be on for this. There's no fucking up. Or if you do fuck up, it's just you know, we got to embrace the hopefully gift flaw of it all. And that it will read just as organic. We were all just down to do it and stoked to do it. And I'm just thrilled that he asked. And look what happens. It's like in the moment he says, hey, why don't we just try this thing? Because we're running out of time and the sun's coming up. I think this might, you know, I got to follow my gut on this. And now it ends up being the thing where people are going, well, I'm not super stoked even on the trailer, but maybe I'll just check it out just to see, you know, what the ending's all about. I'll just sit through it. And then you see what you like along the way. You know, you realize you fall for the feminist revenge story or the performances or the imagery or the shallow homage of it all. So I don't know, it's definitely getting my gears turning as a filmmaker, like with the things that are kind of on my table or floating around right now that I'm sort of wondering is going to hit first. When I get into prep on the next thing, I'm definitely going to be keeping in mind, like, what's the thing that's going to make, you know, consumers like you want to go to the theater? Like, I want those Cocaine Bear people. I want it to be something that I'd want to rewatch. You have to keep your eye on that and know that you're going into something with producers, with partners that want that same shit.
Well said. Very well said. You mentioned very briefly there, like the prosthetic that you had on your eye.
Yeah.
What was the process like for that? Because when it was kind of not early on, but like you had that on for like a really long time in the movie. Like a big chunk of that movie is just you wearing this prosthetic on your eye. What was that process like? How long did it take to put the makeup on? Was it hard to keep it on? Did it try falling off?
It once that thing was on, it was affixed pretty tightly. Like our makeup artist, Ashley Thomas, the sculptor is actually Dan Martin, who did, I believe, prosthetics on Possessor. He works with Brandon Cronenberg, which is why the thing just looked so fucking rad. It was almost sort of paper thin. And when Ashley applied it, you know, what it does is kind of gets you into character. I mean, you lose a bit of your vision to a degree, or when you look in the mirror, you're like, oh my God, your brain is saying you have an injury, something isn't right. So you have this kind of wooziness. It helps with the head wound. It helps with the motivation, getting in the character of it all. But once that thing was on, it was stuck on. You know, it's uncomfortable in the beginning of the day because it's, you know, being shellacked on with cold spirit gum. And then at the end of the day, it's got to get taken off with, you know, stinky ass remover. I feel like at some point I started to get a little irritation, like on my cheekbone. I'm used to it. I've worn prosthetics for a lot of my career, and the makeup would take, I'd say, a minimum of 45 minutes, but that was probably the amount. Yeah, it really wasn't. You know, I throw on my like my Ash like get up, and then you know, get the prosthetic on, a little bit of blood in the hair from Kai Stamps, our hairstylist, and I was ready to roll.
Very cool.
Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to Haptic Intel. Did you do it? Subscribe right now.